Greetings and welcome to the Witch's Cauldron. My name is Paula, and today what we're going to talk about is the different types of magic, and this is going to span everything from the most popular types of magic to white, gray, and black magic explained, to the most typical mainstream kinds of ideas about magical practices. I'm going to give you a little bit of tips for some books based on the various mythologies and gods and goddesses that your practice, your spiritual practice resonates with. So just for, an overarching kind of thing, most people who practice Wicca are familiar with gods and goddess. Most people out on the face of the earth have learned, Greek and Roman mythology, etc. Those sets of deities are called a pantheon. So you can have the Greek pantheon with all of the Greek gods and goddesses, Egyptian, Roman, Celtic, etc., Norse, and Native American. So, and that's not everything just all encompassed. I'm giving you examples of what I'm talking about. So if you really resonate with, like with me, my practice is mostly in the Celtic pantheon because that is my origins and heritage. And those gods and goddesses just seem to really resonate with me. Okay, so that would be like Bridget, or Breed as she's pronounced in Gaelic, the Cailleach, Cernunnos, Rhiannon, Maeve, any of those in that Celtic, pan-Celtic. And then you also have like Seax, which is more Anglo-Saxon. Then you would have like Hindu gods and goddesses, like Lord Ganesha, Lakshmi, Shakti, gods and goddesses of that nature. You even have a Far East, where you would include gods and goddesses like Kuan Yin in your practices. So that's what a pantheon is. That's kind of like the dogma, okay? And you've heard me refer to the members of my coven as a tradition, okay? Most people are also familiar with the term Gardnerian tradition, Dianic tradition, etc., okay? So this refers to the kind of like the dogma that encompasses your coven's spiritual workings, okay? A lot of people are solitaries, but that doesn't mean that you can't have just as a deep and profound spiritual experience as someone who belongs to a coven or a tradition. My tradition is Tradition of the Witches Circle. We all practice various types of magic and with various pantheons, and so it's kind of like an eclectic circle. And a lot of pagans find that very, very liberating because you're not pigeonholed into doing one thing. So an overview of the most popular types of magic. Okay, so you've got high magic. So these are, very ceremonial, ritualized, very complex. Um, it's got complex symbolism and sigils and astrological and numerological correspondences, summoning of otherworldly entities. The main focus of high magic is usually aimed toward spiritual growth and a higher purpose. Okay. Then you've got what's called low magic. And this is what I do a whole lot of. And it's also called earth magic in some traditions. So it can also be aimed at spiritual growth, but it's more instinctual, spontaneous, and creative. This is where I love, because, I'm there writing my own spells, my own rituals. I'm not bound to, like my traditions, Book of Shadows. I'm not bound to that. So it is very presumptuous of anyone who practices low magic to have anything negative to say to someone who is very much into ceremonialized high magic, and then vice versa. So, it's hard enough being a practicing pagan without fighting within our own pantheons and everything, in our own traditions. The next type of magic that I do a tremendous amount is divination, where you can peer into the future, or go to the past to get information. Okay. The one thing that I find that I really resonate with in this type of magic is tarot magic, where you incorporate cards. I just print out, a card, a picture of whatever card or cards that I want to work with, so that I don't ruin my own deck, because some of them, involve burning a card, that kind of stuff. So I don't want to burn out my tarot cards, or get them really nasty or anything. It also includes the use of other divination tools like runes, I Ching, tea leaf, pendulums, scrying. And that means water scrying, mirror scrying, or, like crystal ball scrying, gazing. Then there's what is called sympathetic magic. Okay. And this is where magic, like you have an effigy that represents someone, or an object that represents someone. So when I say that, what should pop in your head is like a voodoo doll. And those are poppets. So a lot of this involves poppet magic. And some people only think of this as hexing. But sympathetic magic can also do things to help someone. Okay. I do sympathetic magic through the use of dolls, especially if I know someone has like made threats against me or my family. I've got a spell that's called Chill the F Out. And it involves the use of like a dollar store Barbie doll, or, 11-inch fashion doll, or whatever it is. And binding them from being able to hurt me or do anything to my family. So something like that. Then you also have talisman magic, where you make a talisman or an amulet, or you charm an object. Okay. For instance, the charms on my charm keeper have all been consecrated for a specific reason, as has my St. Michael Celtic cross right here. So that is talisman magic. It's also, if you make a talisman, you know, like you want to make your own item for your altar. I have an item on my altar that is like old Sculpey clay. And it's just, you know, flattened out into a disc. And, you know, I put various herbs inside with the Sculpey clay for the intent of this talisman. And then I drew a triquetra on the front of it to represent my tradition. And something like that. That's a talisman that you have made. You can make talismans to draw, you know, your true love to you or something like that. Although you all know I hate love spells. I hate them, hate them, hate them. Now this is, the next one is where I really do a lot of work, and that's folk magic. And this is something like, it's not ritualized, okay? It's very much on the fly. So let's say if you're in Pennsylvania Dutch country and you see the hexes up on the barns, that's a type of folk magic. It's a type of hoodoo. You may have seen me, you know, say something about, well, somebody needs to, you know, get thrown in. I got a box of graveyard dirt and some coffin nails just waiting for that evil, you know, SOB. And, you know, that is a type of folk magic. That's the kind of stuff that gets handed down through, you know, in your family, through cultures. And, you know, you don't even know where it really originated. Another kind of thing. A lot of people called these like superstitions and stuff. But my mother always said, you know, you never start like making sauerkraut, fermented your own sauerkraut, unless you have to start it on the new moon. If you start it at any other time, it'll mold in the crock before it's finished fermented. And you wouldn't believe it, but I'll be daggum if it wasn't true, because I've tried to make, you know, my own sauerkraut and fermented stuff. And I was like, oh, well, you know, I'll just throw it in here and go, But that's folk magic. Those are the types of things that are just handed down through families. There's also elemental magic. And that's using the powers of the sacred elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Now, it can get really complex. And if you do not do it right, you piss the elemental off, and then you have a whole other world of hurt coming down on your life. So unless you are an extremely, most Wiccans, and you know, will call the elements to the ritual as like to be present, you know, and to draw on the energy, but you're not asking them to aid you to do anything. You have to be very, very careful with an elemental, or else you can do what I call is malignant magic. And then that would be like, if you call an elemental and then you don't release them to go back, the elemental is then bound to that magical practitioner. And, you know, if you forgot to release, let's say, elemental water, and then all of a sudden you start having all kinds of plumbing issues, you know, your house developing leaks and this and that and the other, well, guess what? That's because you pissed off a water elemental. Then the last one is what is called petition magic. And that's what most closely resembles what is traditionally thought of as a prayer in the Judeo-Christian church. Okay? So it's like you are petitioning a higher power to grant you something that you desire. Okay? So those are like the 8 biggest kind of overarching types of magic that you perform. Okay? And those are big categories. But then over and above that, there is, you may have heard people refer to themselves as a white witch, or, oh, well, no, that's a dark witch. She's, just does black magic and stuff like that. Or I'm a green witch, or, that kind of stuff. So you can have all kinds of magic. You can have all kinds of witches. Okay. White magic is usually considered to be performed for the purpose of connecting to spiritual forces to gain wisdom, insight, or enlightenment, to heal, things of that nature. Okay. Black magic is done to harm or manipulate someone. In other words, you are affecting someone else's free will. Okay. You're trying to bid them, to do your bidding. And then you have gray magic, which is just kind of everything in between. All right. Now, it's not, I have my views on like gray magic and stuff have changed over the years. And my views on some types of magic that people automatically associate with black magic, like blood magic or sex magic, I don't think that they fall into that category necessarily. It's the intent that drives whether it's white, gray, or black. Okay. I've discussed on this channel a spell that I did to protect a child. I did not direct anything in one particular, go after this person because they did blah, blah, blah. The child's father was a heroin addict, and he actually would load her up as when she was a baby and take her into downtown Richmond to go get his heroin fix. And I did a spell that said, anyone who endangers this child can, the light of Kali, bring it to light and bring that person to justice as she sees fit. And I didn't specify who. Well, not only did that child's father get arrested for his 5th DUI, her mother got arrested for a DUI, her second one. And so, because I did not, all I did is say, I want to direct this to protect a child. Okay. Most people would have said, because I used a blood offering, my own blood, I put 2 drops of my own blood as an offering. And because I did that, a lot of people said, oh my God, that's black magic, blah, 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 blah. Well, no, it's not. That was done to protect a child who was too young to protect herself. She wasn't even 2 years old. She was little tiny baby. And I do not regret that one damn bit. And I call that gray magic because someone else was affected and someone else's free will was affected. The child's father ended up getting 22 months in a state prison for DUIs and possession. And her mother had to go through, like alcohol court and get a blow and go put on her car. And that was expensive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was totally fine with doing that kind of magic. I do not consider that to be black magic. If you'd have asked me that 15 years ago, I would have said that was black magic because it involved the offering of blood. Today, if it comes to protecting me and mine, it's on and popping. I'm good. So, but when I do something like this in the wards of my home, if anyone intends harm to me, I have mirrors up in every window of my house. And I just, do a general said that anybody who sends harmful things my way, that it gets reflected back on them threefold. And then it's up to the universe to mete out that judgment, not me. I'm just reflecting it back to them. So I do not have a problem with that kind of magic. You also have different kinds of Wiccans and witches. Okay. One is a traditional witch. And this is they have a base in the history of witchcraft that came before Wicca. Wicca is a new religion, a relatively new religion. It is not what was practiced by, the Celts or, ancient pagans or anything. That's Wicca is not what they practiced. There's also, when I talked about those traditions, there are Gardnerian tradition witches, and that is, they follow the dogma that Gerald Gardner came up with in Wicca. And, it's very based in high magic and high ceremony. In order to be a Gardnerian witch, you have to be initiated. You can't initiate yourself like a lot of solitaries do. And it's very, very structured in how you advance through that tradition and how your practice as a magical practitioner can evolve. There's also Alexandrian tradition, and that was developed by Alex and Maxine Sanders. It's a British derivative of Wicca, but it also pulls from the Kabbalah, and it's a little bit more eclectic and not as structured in high ceremonial magic. Okay. Then you've got Correllian Wicca. It was founded in the late 20th century by Caroline High Correll. She claimed that she was from hereditary witches. She was psychic, a healer, an herbalist. And then she, her lineage and her practice was very influenced by Arabian witchcraft. That version of Wicca is very, very widely practiced these days. And you also have what are called sea witches. And that's a witch that has very, very strong ties to water and often uses water in that element in their magical practice. And they often use things like shells and driftwood, sand, etc., coming from, beaches, rivers, etc. And it's really kind of, they feel really connected to the fae that are water elementals or water sprites, like merfolk, sirens, that kind of stuff. You also have kitchen witches, or they're sometimes referred to as hearth witches. They create most of their magic at home in the kitchen. It's home based. So they love to cook and brew and use herbs for healing. They usually have their own garden. They combine their own individual energy rather than drawing universal energy, they put a lot of their own energy into their magical workings and then amp that up through the use of essential oils and herbs and food, making their own ritual items like pouring their own candles, etc., like that. I do a lot of kitchen witchery in my home and in my practice. Almost every meal that I make has an element of kitchen witchery. I've got certain spoons, wooden spoons and bamboo spoons that I wood burned sigils in for specific intent. So those are incorporated in my day-to-day cooking, okay? As well as doing herbal correspondences to season food for a particular intent, okay? Then you've got hedge witches. And hedge witches communicate with the spiritual world and can send messages between our realm and the realm of the spiritual world. In other words, they are used to jumping the hedge and going into other realms. And this is where kind of like the old, witches flying on broomsticks kind of stuff seems to have evolved from. And that was a misunderstanding of what was meant when a hedge witch flew into a spiritual realm, another realm. Okay. You've also got Dianic witches, that there is no men allowed. It is solely goddess centric. Okay. And that's it. Elemental witches, again, they perform elemental magic. They call on the elements. They may have an element that you more deeply identify with when you're calling on and doing certain types of magic. There are ceremonial witches that the ceremonies in which rituals that they hold are held in especially high regard. And they usually call on specific beings and spiritual entities and deities to assist them in whatever they're casting. So a lot of Wiccans and witches do this without, when you're looking up your correspondences for the intent, you're looking at gods and goddesses, you're looking at herbs and gems and, everything, oils and everything, sigils, alchemical symbols, etc. And most Wiccans don't realize, that at that point that there are ceremonial witches. Then you have a green witch. This is someone who is really drawn to an earth-centric practice. They are very, very connected to earth energies, and they often use plants and greenery in their spell work. A lot of times they've got beautiful gardens, but they also go out and wildcraft and gather herbs from their natural surroundings for their spiritual practice, for their magical practice. You've got hereditary witches, and that is a witch that was born into witchcraft. And this gets really kind of dicey sometimes, because it's kind of like hereditary witches are not bound by the Wiccan Rede. Okay, so the law of three, and it harm none, that's out the door with hereditary witches, because that is a Wiccan Gardnerian tradition. Okay, it's not witchcraft. Cosmic witches are contemporary witches that look to astrology, astronomy, and you work elements and influences, planetary influences, timing through the zodiac, and alignment of the stars to really drive your spells and rituals. You've got secular witches. They still do, crystals and herbs and cast spells, but they don't attach spirituality to it. It's not part of their spiritual practice. Secular witches don't worship a deity or a higher being, okay? And it's not that the secular witch cannot be spiritual, it's just that their spell casting in ritual work isn't, okay? Then you've got a solitary witch. This is someone that's usually been, self-initiated, or who was formally trained in a coven and then left for whatever reason, because you just like doing your own thing, and they don't ascribe to any one pantheon, any one tradition, anything like that. They do their practice, okay? Then you've got an eclectic witch, and they practice, they don't have a set religion, practice, tradition, or culture. This is where I kind of fit in, because I've got, I do Southern Conjure and Hoodoo. I do regular Wicca. I work with the archangels and various saints for certain things. So that's Judeo-Christian. I am not bound by dogma when it comes to my spiritual path. So that's an eclectic witch. Now, around the globe, I can recommend some really good books or authors, okay? Now, one that pops into mind right off the bat is DJ Conway. And DJ Conway wrote a couple of my favorite books. One was on mountain folklore magic that is specific to like the Appalachian Mountains where I'm from. Another is Celtic myth and magic. Another really, really good author for specific types of witchcraft is Raven Grimassi. And he writes a lot of books, but he practices what is called strega, and that's a traditional Italian witchcraft. There, like I said, those pantheons around the world, you can have someone who does only Egyptian gods and goddesses that they work with, only Hindu, only, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is all about what feels right to your path, where you want to go, okay? And it really does help when you read the mythology of a particular pantheon, like the Celtic pantheon. Certain stories in that mythology will resonate with you, okay? And then you can either, do the solitary witch thing and stick in your one little pantheon, or you can be like me and just bebop all over the place, and what feels good, that's what you do, okay? One of the best on Southern Conjure, well, there's a couple of them. I recommend anything that's written by Star Cassis, and also Orion Foxwood is another one. Southern Conjure, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, where I'm from, it's more like a mountain hoodoo. It combines Judeo-Christian, Native American, and then you have very heavy influences of Irish, Scots-Irish, English, and then even Germanic and Scandinavian peoples in the area where I'm from. So that's where that one is. And I mean, it's a big form of low magic, you know, divination through casting the bones of, you know, like chicken bones, something like that. And that's where my coffin nails and graveyard dirt comes in. So just saying, where you work with your ancestors for certain things. You know, and in the further south you go in the United States, instead of that Native American influence, it's very, very heavily influenced by African hoodoo that came over with the slaves. So it takes on a different flavor the further south you go. And then you've also got voodoo, which is Haitian. It's not African in origin. It's Haitian in origin. Conjure is African in origin. And then you've got, you know, various other types of folk magic in the, like in the United States. You've got people who practice Santeria, for instance. And some of them are Christian based. You have Trinitarian witches that work, you know, instead of gods and goddesses, you know, they work with the females from the Bible, female saints, male saints, you know, and then the overall creator and, you know, Father, Son, Holy Spirit over everything. Okay. So, and then there's, you know, even flavors on that. There's a Jewish tradition for Kabbalah, which is, you know, Kabbalah magic. So your practice is only limited by your mind. Okay. The only thing that can hold you back is not wanting to learn more. Okay. So with that, my friends, I hope you found this interesting and I was able to clarify a little bit of gray magic, white magic, black magic, the different types of traditions, the different types of witches, and give you a little bit of clarity about that whole, you know, practice, and maybe give you some insight on where you want to take your spiritual practice now that we're at the end of the Wicca 101 series. So with that, everyone, merry we did meet, merry we will part. Until we merry meet again, be well and walk in love and light, everybody. Bye.